The Freemasons. For people who don't know, a Freemason is a secret society. Well, technically not anymore because we pretty much know everything about Freemason nowadays. The only thing they still keep secrets is basically whatever specific rituals and ceremonies they do inside in each respective level because they want to keep the magic, right, so to speak, right? They don't want you to do research because it's like saying it's like being going to an aquarium and you already know all about the animals. So once you go there with all that information, it doesn't feel as magical or incredible if you already know everything, right? Este, but yeah, Freemasonry, if it was relabeled as a religion, right, it would be the 11th largest religion in the world. If you want to remove the labels of like traditional African religions, which is like thousands of different religions being labeled into one because it's on the same continent, then it would be the sixth largest religion in the world. But if you remove the irreligious people as their own category, it will be the fifth largest religion in the world, over 6 million people. That's how powerful it is. The Freemasonry is the oldest, largest, and most powerful secret society that still exists today. Now, people don't know that Freemasonry has done actual terrible shit. And I don't mean in a conspiracy theory type of way, right? Like any other organization in the world, eventually it's bound to happen that you gotta do some bad things, either a specific individual or as a collective as a whole. For example, I'm Boricua, right, Puerto Rican, and there are Freemasons in Puerto Rico, although they have a more positive reputation than the US or the UK, right? Because it has more of a history of revolutionary struggle for the liberation of the people. For example, these two lodges you see right here, right next to me, they're both from Añasco, right? But they do not belong to the same Grand Lodge. In fact, there are two Grand Lodges in Puerto Rico. And the one in the bottom that looks like the blue is called El Respetable Logia Amor y Trabajo. That belongs to the Grand Lodge of Puerto Rico, right? Which is an irregular at the Grand Lodge. Irregular means they are considered not legitimate, or at the very least, only some people recognize it. For example, the Continental Freemasons in France will recognize them. For example, these are the Freemasons that allow atheists and women into the organization. The one at the top, Respetable Logia Rafael Ariga número 110, that belongs to the United Grand and Sovereign Freemason Lodge. That is a regular lodge. That means that it's recognized by the United Grand Lodge of England, which is the first United Grand Lodge in the world, and it has basically a universal constitution where if you're a Freemason or consider yourself Freemason, you want legitimacy, you want the United Grand Lodge of England to recognize you as a legit organization and not the one at the bottom that only some people like in continental Europe may recognize it, who are considered more radical. The irregular version was founded in 1952 as a response of the colonial constitution of Puerto Rico. But enough sidetrack. It's a good example what we talk about. The reason they became so powerful, right, and so influential and so rich as well at one point in time, because they contributed one of the worst things in human history, even though by their standard it was considered normal and acceptable, if not even cool at the time, right? For example, many Freemasons, individuals, and you can argue some of the largest, even the Grand Lodge at one point in time, right, of England, had participated, promoted, and defended the Atlantic slave trade and the genocide against the indigenous peoples of the Americas, which around the death toll of 100 million people, and combine the Atlantic slave trade plus the genocide of all the Americas, we talk about 10% of the human population died. Remember, they were not the only one. They're just a very small, you can argue, insignificant group within the overall event of the history of it. But this is the event where, upon other things, the continuous support of colonialism and empire building for the British Empire, the Spaniard Empire, the French Empire, the Belgians, and the French and all the other imperial powers at the time contributed that led to the connection of aristocracy, nobility, and monarchy. For example, 20 years after the foundation of the United Grand Lodge of England, you know, Prince William of England became a member. making it the first among many British monarchs, among the British royal family joined the Freemasonry, right? Not all of them, only some of them, right? Many of them joined and to contribute the colonial imperial thing. And for example, in the rare cases where they did allow Native Americans, for example, to join the Freemasonry, it was based on their association or assimilation to like they tame the savage in a racist way, right? To civilize the beasts, in a very racist context of this. Not only that, the Italian Fascist Party, many of their founding supporters were Masons. In fact, unlike Germany or Spain, who were persecuted by the fascists, in the Spain in the beginning they support Francisco Franco, and then they were betrayed and were persecuted by Franco because at the end of the day, Catholics hate Masons, right? But in Italy, it's a different story. In Italy, many of the highest leading people in the fascist Italian government were Freemasons. They were protected by Mussolini, right? Because Mussolini, himself was an atheist and never cared about the Catholic anti-Masonic sentiment. So he was okay with the Freemasons working with them because for him, if you're with me, I'm cool, right? I don't care about your beliefs, right? Unlike Germany and Spain, who actively persecute them. So there's that. So thanks to the first modern day fascist country, which is Italy, it was thanks to the Freemasons to a very small extent and contributed to the many losses of life that will come after. Many of the founding fathers were Freemasons of the United States, and like I already mentioned in my previous videos about fascism originating in the United States. So you can argue this is a contribution as well from them. And also, speaking of fascists, the P2 Lodge, which was a fascist Masonic organization, right? They almost did a coup d'etat, and they practically speaking controlled the entire government at one point in time. And it wasn't until after the revelation of their fascist control over Italy in a clandestine way that the United Grand Lodge of England took them their status as a legitimate organization, got kicked out by the proper Masonic order. So remember, even people who are Freemason or trying to defend Freemason, oh, the P2 Lodge were not legitimate. They only stopped being legitimate after the revelation, right? So they already did all these crimes, and then after it was given the light what really happened, they got kicked out. So they were still recognized during this period. So I don't care what they say, right? It's basically religious apologies. It's like a Christian that says, we never did those awful things like the crusade issue, or if they acknowledge it, they were not really Christians, or you don't understand the context, right? But that's the way of thinking, right? They have to defend no matter what. So yeah, it's like motherfucker, you don't understand what you're talking about, right? And this is not an excuse for people like persecute Freemason or kill Freemason or to be a bigot. Don't do that. Like I said in the Puerto Rican example, like they contribute to our liberation. The opposite of what the average Freemason in the UK and America does, right? Hell, there are some places in the United States in the former Confederacy they still don't allow black people to join, right? It's only slowly that they still allow, but there are some places in some states where they still don't allow African Americans to join. And in the 1920s, when the second Ku Klux Klan was created, founded by a Freemason, by the way, it was at its peak. The second Klan was its most powerful, reaching out to 20 million members and governed, won many elections in the Senate and mayors and elected, and governors were Klan members. Many of them joined Freemasons. Many of them Freemasons joined the KKK. Many KKK members joined the Freemason, right? This is during the period was called the golden age of secret societies, where many secret societies and fraternities were at their peak. Roughly around 20% of the male population were members of one secret society organization in some shape or form. Some, like I mentioned earlier about the United States, where the only states with their own grand law they still don't allow Prince Hall or African American to join are South Carolina, Arizona, Mississippi, and if I'm not mistaken, the Wyoming. Those are the ones that still don't allow African Americans to join in. So there's that. And also fun fact, you know, out of all the U.S. presidents who were Masons, if I'm not mistaken, there's 13 of them. One of them is Harry Truman. You know, the guy who dropped the atomic bomb. Even though it wasn't necessary, they only dropped and killed thousands of innocent people just as a dignitary cause that to show the communists, or in reality state capitalists, the Soviet Union, that look at how powerful we are. Don't mess with us. We will commit casual genocide if you dare to spread the idea that poor people should stay poor. So there's that, you know. And people who ask who was the last Masonic president, it was actually Gerald Ford. So yeah, we haven't had a Masonic president for pretty much almost 50 years now. So there's that. So that's all I had to say. It's pretty a little unscripted, you know. And there's not that many videos about people actually point out the awful thing Masons actually done that isn't based on conspiracy theory nonsense. So yeah, take a good guy, watch this video, like, subscribe, share. I'll see you guys next time.